Well, I did not have Raheem the Dream Morris coming to the Falcons as their next head coach, but we're going to break down this hire. I'm going to try to be optimistic about it, try to be a half glass full kind of person right now. That's how I tend to be when head coaching hires are made. I try to look for the positive, but I am blindsided. I did not see this coming, and I am not a fan of this hire, to be honest with you guys. It didn't have to be Bill Belichick, but when you got Mike Vrabel and Ben Johnson just sitting out there, even if Ben Johnson went to Washington, you could have had Vrabel. And ultimately, when the Falcons moved on from Arthur Smith, the thought was they wanted to make a splash. I don't know if Raheem Morris is a splash hire. And the most important thing is winning games, and it doesn't matter what time of day and what day of the week it is, but this doesn't feel like an upgrade from Arthur Smith, does it? I feel like this is a lateral move and maybe an 8 or 9 win season at best, and I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But I just can't really wrap my head around Raheem Morris being the best candidate amongst a really good pool of candidates still out there. But Adam Schefter was the first one to report the news that the Falcons are going to hire Raheem Morris. And when I heard the news, I think, like everyone watching right now, my initial reaction was WTF in much more colorful words. But I'm blindsided. Like Ali Crow, right? For those of you that have been following our coverage for the last 2-3 weeks, I thought it was Bill Belichick all the way. I thought that the Falcons had backed off Belichick because they were looking for some leverage, because they did not want Bill Belichick to maybe have complete personnel control. Now, I had heard some rumblings of people in Flowery Branch didn't want Arthur Blank to hire Belichick because he might bring his own posse in there and people could be out of jobs. And hey, that sucks, but that's the NFL. That's the business. Everyone's been fired at some point in the NFL. So I don't know if Arthur Blank got strong-armed into passing on Belichick because Rich McKay and Terry Fontenot didn't want to have a reduced role. But Arthur, do you not remember why you fired Arthur Smith? I don't think it was because of another 7-10 season. If that was the case, then we might have seen Arthur Smith go earlier in the year. We heard a lot of confidence coming down from Arthur Blank on Arthur Smith. I believe they moved on from Arthur Smith because they wanted to make a splash hire. They were tired of being 7-win season and having no national attention and just kind of being the runt of the NFL. And hiring Raheem Morris, when you had these candidates still out there, just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't. And I think Raheem Morris has the capabilities of being a good head coach. I'm actually one of the few people out there that are willing to give guys a second opportunity at being a head coach because I think people are very capable in any field of learning from their mistakes and being better in the second opportunity. But Mike Vrabel was just sitting there. You brought him in for an interview yesterday. I don't know if he left skid marks all over the toilet or what happened. Was it like George Costanza? Did Arthur Blank catch Vrabel eating a donut at the top of the trash? Like, what happened in that interview where you left it thinking, I know that Vrabel guy took the Tennessee Titans to the 1 seed, coach of the year, 3 straight playoffs, but something about Raheem the Dream Morris screams, I want to bring him back after him being the interim head coach just 4 seasons ago. Now, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not already, by the way, because we are the #1 Atlanta Falcons YouTube community out there. No one talks about the Falcons as frequently as we do. So if you're looking for up-to-speed, latest news and rumors content on your favorite team, hit that sub button and help us get to the ultimate goal for now, 20,000 subscribers. Now let's get some background information on Raheem Morris, kind of the Wikipedia, if you will. He's been the Rams DC since 2021, and I think he's done a good job. Like this video is not about Raheem Morris sucks. I think Raheem Morris has the capabilities of being a good head coach. But I think Atlanta is passing on better coaches. That's the big takeaway here from me. Now, he was with the Falcons from 2015 to 2020. He was the interim after Dan Quinn got fired, and I thought he did a pretty solid job with what he had to work with going 4-7. They definitely were better with Morris in that 2020 year than what they had with Dan Quinn to begin the season. But he was the Buccaneers coach way back when, 2009 to 2011. Did not go well, 17-31. And hey, Bill Belichick didn't work out with the Browns necessarily. Didn't work out with the Jets super duper well. Pete Carroll kind of flamed out in New England, believe it or not, before he went to USC and then to Seattle. But what are we doing? Like, that's what I'm thinking here. Like, you had an opportunity to maybe make a huge upgrade from Arthur Smith with Ben Johnson, Belichick, and Mike Vrabel all just sitting on the market. And this feels like a lateral move. It does. And I want to be wrong, but I am not too optimistic about this hire. Now, if you want to be upbeat about it, let me sell you on the pros of hiring Raheem Morris. Because we actually talked about this in a video on the channel just 2, 3, 4 days ago. His GM from the Rams, Les Snead, had glowing things to say about his DC during the final press conference of the year. I know this, says Les Snead, he'll be able to hire an unbelievable staff. Every coach who's any good, who's qualified, they're going to want to work for Raheem. And I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot of tampering charges because just about every player in the NFL is going to text him and want to come play for him. And that brings me to this point. This offensive coordinator hire will be huge for Raheem Morris' success in Atlanta. Zach Robinson, the passing game coordinator for the Rams, he's been getting a lot of OC buzz. He's definitely a name to keep an eye on. He might join Morris going from LA to Atlanta. But Morris, with that defensive background, it's so important for DCs that get head coaching opportunities to hit the OC hire out of the ballpark. We saw it with Dan Quinn, right? He gets Shanahan, and they go to a Super Bowl. Like, it is so important for DCs. And I think there is this overall notion across NFL fans that if you're a defensive guy, you don't know the first thing about offense. Go tell D'Amico Ryans that, who just had a great year with a rookie QB. So it can be done. Like, you can go with a defensive coordinator, draft a rookie QB, and have success. The Houston Texans just did it. Is that the most common path? No, it's not. But it can be done. But this OC hire, this may very well make or break Morris's beginning in Atlanta. So grade the hiring of Raheem Morris. A, B, C, D, or F. Enough of me blabbering on. What do you guys think? I'd give it a C minus, right? C's average. C's get degrees. And Raheem Morris might get you 7, 8, maybe 9 wins. And 9 wins this year would have won you the NFC South. But I go back to who the candidates that were still on the market that you passed on. If I told you guys in early January when they fired Arthur Smith, they'd be firing him for Raheem Morris, how many of you would take that? If I also added on Belichick, Vrabel, and Ben Johnson are still on the market. Maybe Ben Johnson to Washington is a foregone conclusion, but give me Vrabel over Raheem Morris, and I'm not going to think twice about it. Now, the next part of the show is also equally as important because now that the Falcons have their next head coach, now the conversation changes to who is going to be the next quarterback because there's no way he's running it back with Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke. And with the 8th overall pick in a pretty QB-friendly draft class, keep an eye on these names now. Now we start talking about who the 2024 quarterback is going to be. I have heard some murmurs. I've heard whispers, some chatter of Atlanta maybe moving up in the draft. But you need someone to move down. And I think Chicago's going to go with Caleb Williams. I think Drake May and Jaden Daniels are going to follow suit to Washington and New England. Fingers crossed Jaden Daniels maybe slips to Atlanta at 8. But as much as you may want to move up in the draft, you need to find someone to move down. And the top 3 teams all need a quarterback. So maybe Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix. I don't know if any of those guys are for sure top 10 picks. I don't think so. So maybe in round 2 they could make a lot of sense. But I'll toss this your way. Go look at some previous drafts. Find me a good quarterback taken in round 2. The best one I can think of, Derek Carr and Andy Dalton. It just doesn't have a very high hit rate. Which leads me to another option for Atlanta, Justin Fields. If Caleb Williams is going to go to Chicago at number 1 overall, Justin Fields is packing his bags. And how about he returns to his hometown state, right? Come back to where he grew up, played from Kennesaw, played his first year in college at Athens for UGA. I think Justin Fields to Atlanta makes so much sense. this should be the number one guy. If the Bears are moving on from Justin Fields to draft Caleb Williams, which I think they will be doing, Fields has to be the number one target for Atlanta. You get Justin Fields, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and use that 8th overall pick on Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze or one of these other stud wide receivers, or try and build up your defense with like a DJ Dallas or someone to that tune. You've got a good offensive line. The trenches are pretty solid. And if you get Fields all those weapons to work with, I feel like a homecoming for him is going to do wonders. I'm a big fan of Justin Fields. I don't think he has gotten a fair shot in Chicago in terms of the overall, just the awful coaching staff and the turmoil and the turnover they've had to deal with in the Windy City. The weapons have not been great. The offensive line didn't get good until this year. I think Fields in Atlanta makes a lot of sense for the Falcons, for the Bears to go get Caleb Williams. This should be Raheem Morris's number one target. Now, let's say the Falcons pass on Fields. I don't know. Let's just say he goes to the Raiders. He goes somewhere else. There are some free agent QBs out there. I have heard some ESPN rumors of Cousins coming down to Atlanta, but that was always with a package of Bill Belichick. I don't know if Kirk Cousins wants to pick up his family and leave Minnesota, where he's got a good thing going, to play under Raheem Morris. Baker's probably going to get re-signed by the Bucs. If he doesn't get re-signed by the Bucs, it means the Falcons paid Baker more. And I think Baker's in a spot where no one should outbid Tampa for Baker, right? Let's let Baker play a couple more years before we really buy in on him being a franchise QB. I'm not interested in Tannehill. Jimmy Garoppolo is likely going to get cut by the Raiders, so that could be a name to keep an eye on. Jacoby Brissett could be a stopgap quarterback, but none of these are really going to put a lot of butts in seats. And did Arthur Blank really make this firing and make this hire to start a whole new rebuild with a short-term quarterback like Atlanta had with Mariota? No. The Falcons have a roster that's pretty well designed to win right now. Look at the Buccaneers as an example. Look at the Detroit Lions. Like, those two teams just played a divisional round playoff game, and those two teams, take the Lions for starters, were nowhere near winning 2 playoff games just 3-4 seasons ago, right? Get a good roster, get a good head coach, you can dramatically turn things around. And then you look at the Buccaneers. I mean, they just took advantage of a weak NFC South. They won 9 games, and they were able to win a playoff game. And I think Arthur Blank believes that's where his Falcons could be. But if you roll out with a Jacoby Brissett or a Ryan Tannehill or a Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm not so sure about that. I'm not. Now, like I said, look for a run at Justin Fields, maybe Kirk Cousins, if the Vikings want to go draft a quarterback. I had recently heard that Minnesota was aggressively looking to trade up in last year's draft to get Anthony Richardson. Ultimately, that did not happen. But if the Vikings decide, you know what, it's time to go young, it's time to draft a QB, it's time to move on from Captain Kirk and his torn Achilles, the Falcons seem like very logical destinations for both Justin Fields and Kirk Cousins for Raheem Morris. But Raheem Morris is the next Falcons head coach. He was the Falcons head coach just 2 coaches ago. I don't know if we've ever had a head coach go from interim somewhere else back to that team. Maybe I'm forgetting an obvious one, but this is just a bizarre hire in some ways. I think it's a bit of a safe hire as well. Like, you want to get the ball in play, there you go. I don't think Raheem Morris is going to completely, utterly crash and fail. But I go back to, you fired Arthur Smith to make a big move. And this is the big move you had saved up. This is a disappointment.